Barbara Mullenix had always been the kind of mother people admired. She was hardworking, devoted, and deeply protective of her only daughter, Rachel. After years of personal struggles, she had managed to create a life of comfort and stability, a life she hoped would give Rachel opportunities she never had. To her friends and neighbors, Barbara seemed like a woman who had everything under control, but beneath that calm surface, she carried the constant worries of a single mother. Every decision she made, every step she took, was guided by her love and concern for Rachel's future. She wanted her daughter to grow into someone strong and independent, but also safe from the dangers of the world. That sense of safety began to slip away when Rachel introduced her new boyfriend, Daniel. He was older, restless, and gave off an energy that Barbara couldn't ignore. At first, she tried to be polite, even welcoming, but her instincts told her something about him was wrong. His eyes carried a kind of defiance, and his attitude suggested he wasn't someone who cared about responsibility or building a stable life. To Barbara, Daniel wasn't just a poor choice, he was a threat to the future she had worked so hard to secure for Rachel. The more Barbara saw him around, the more uneasy she became. She would notice how Rachel laughed a little too loudly in his presence, how she hung on his every word, and how quickly she began dismissing her mother's advice. Barbara confided in close friends, telling them she couldn't shake the feeling that Daniel would bring nothing but heartbreak and danger. While others brushed off her concerns as a mother being overly protective, Barbara's smile told a different story. It was a smile lined with worry, as though she already knew her daughter's choice would come at a devastating cost. Rachel was at an age where freedom seemed more important than anything else. To her, Daniel was exciting, mysterious, and everything her quiet life with her mother was not. He promised her a future filled with adventure, where no one could control them or tell them what to do. That sense of rebellion was intoxicating for Rachel, who had spent her whole life under Barbara's careful watch. Slowly, her mother's rules began to feel suffocating, and instead of appreciating the protection Barbara offered, Rachel began to see it as an obstacle she needed to escape. Daniel fed that feeling, always reminding her that her mother didn't understand, that she was trying to keep them apart. The bond between mother and daughter, once so close, started to break apart. Rachel stopped sharing the details of her day, and her excuses for staying out late became less convincing. Barbara noticed the lies, the late-night phone calls, the hurried texts Rachel tried to hide. Every sign pointed to Daniel pulling her daughter further away, and Barbara's fear deepened. But whenever she tried to confront Rachel, the response was coldness or anger. It was as if the girl she had raised had been replaced with someone who saw her as the enemy. Behind closed doors, Daniel was fueling this transformation. He painted Barbara as controlling and manipulative, convincing Rachel that she would never be free as long as her mother was alive. These whispers took root in Rachel's mind, twisting her perspective until she believed them. The warmth that once defined her relationship with her mother had turned into distance, resentment, and defiance. What began as a teenage romance had grown into a dangerous obsession, one that was preparing to push Rachel into a world of choices darker than she could ever imagine. The tension inside the Mullenix household was growing unbearable. Barbara could sense that her daughter was slipping further and further away, but she had no idea how far things had already gone. She considered going to the police, or even taking legal steps to cut Daniel out of Rachel's life. Barbara was determined to protect her child, even if it meant risking Rachel's anger. But while she was trying to figure out a way to intervene, Daniel was creating a plan of his own. To him, Barbara wasn't just an inconvenience, she was an obstacle that needed to be permanently removed. The idea started as a suggestion, a whisper meant to test Rachel's reaction. He told her that as long as Barbara was around, they would never have peace, never have freedom. At first, Rachel resisted, horrified at the thought of harming her own mother. But Daniel didn't let it go. He pushed the idea again and again, twisting it into something that sounded less like murder and more like survival. If they wanted to be together, he said, Barbara had to be out of the picture. He convinced Rachel that her mother would never stop interfering, that sooner or later she would tear them apart. The more Rachel listened, the more her resistance began to weaken. She was young, impressionable, and blinded by the intensity of her feelings for Daniel. What she didn't see was how carefully he was manipulating her, step by step, into believing that betrayal was her only option. Soon, the whispered suggestion turned into detailed conversations. They discussed how it could be done, where it would happen, and what to do afterward. By the time the plan was complete, Rachel was trapped in a web of lies and manipulation, standing on the edge of a decision that would change everything forever. On the night everything unraveled, the air inside the house carried an uneasy stillness. To anyone outside, it might have looked like an ordinary evening. The lights glowed softly through the windows, and the neighborhood around Barbara's home was quiet. But inside, a storm was about to strike. Barbara went about her usual routine, unaware that her daughter and the boy she disapproved of were preparing to take her life. What made the night even more chilling was how ordinary it appeared. Nothing about Barbara's final hours suggested the horror that was about to unfold. When the moment came, it was sudden and merciless. Barbara, who had always been the protector, had no chance to protect herself. The betrayal was swift, carried out not by a stranger but by the very person she trusted most in the world. The shock of that betrayal was perhaps more painful than the attack itself. In the space of minutes, the years of sacrifice, love, and devotion Barbara had poured into raising Rachel ended in violence. Her life was stolen not by an intruder, but by her daughter, guided by the manipulations of Daniel. Afterward, the house fell silent again, but the calm was far darker. Rachel and Daniel moved with a cold determination, focused only on erasing what had been done. They worked to cover their tracks, handling evidence as though they had rehearsed it. Every detail of the plan was carried out, from disposing of what could tie them to the crime, to making sure Barbara's sudden absence looked like a mystery. To the outside world, it would appear as if Barbara had simply vanished, leaving unanswered questions and worried friends behind. But within the walls of that house, the truth was written in silence, betrayal, and an unthinkable crime that could never be undone. In the days that followed Barbara's disappearance, the cracks in Rachel and Daniel's story began to show. At first, they pretended nothing was wrong, telling friends and neighbors that Barbara had gone away or was busy with personal matters. But those who knew Barbara well found the explanation strange. She was not the type of woman to vanish without warning, and her absence felt unnatural. Calls went unanswered, her routines were abandoned, and the warmth she brought to her community was suddenly gone. Suspicion grew quickly, and whispers began to spread that something terrible had happened. Investigators were soon drawn into the case, and it did not take long for their attention to fall on Rachel and Daniel. The couple's behavior raised red flags. Rachel seemed distant, evasive, and far too calm for someone whose mother was missing. Daniel's presence only made things worse. He hovered protectively around Rachel, often speaking for her, as though he were trying to control the narrative. But behind the masks they wore, evidence was waiting to be uncovered. Digital trails told a story the young pair couldn't hide. Text messages, internet searches, and deleted files revealed chilling conversations about ending Barbara's life. Each discovery pulled investigators closer to the truth. When the evidence became undeniable, arrests were made. The reality of the crime shocked everyone who had known the family. A devoted mother, betrayed by the daughter she had raised and the boy she had feared all along, had paid the ultimate price for her instincts. The case sent waves of disbelief through the community, serving as a grim reminder of how love can be twisted into manipulation and how trust, once broken, can lead to unimaginable consequences. Barbara's story ended in tragedy, but it left behind a warning that would never be forgotten.